There was one instance in the October meeting where one of the options was presented, and it was apparent that two groups had completely opposite understandings of what it meant. So just for the sake of having a conversation and being able to pick up on good ideas, and for the sake of clarity, we wanted to have these two meetings. They're being recorded. Dr. North is taking notes, and they're going to be compiled so that when both last night's information and your information is put together, we can all kind of see where people think things are going pretty well and would be fine with it. And there's others where there's going to be a need for some discussion and a little bit of horse trading, because you've gone a long way. I'm obviously joining your party very late in the process, and I've watched and read as much as I can, but we're now at the point where stuff's being put on the table and you're moving some stuff around and seeking some sort of consensus agreement. And at the end of the night on November 8th, there's an up or down vote. And so we just want to make sure that you're having as many discussions as possible, either in groups like this, or you can get on the phone, however it is you want to interact with other commissioners, so that we have a smoother, even though we're in that weird hybrid setting, we have a smoother interaction, so we can get to the end of the rope, so we can send this off to the secretary and she can have her people look at it, so she meets the mandated December 1st deadline. And one of the things that came up last night is we were talking about some of the options seem generic, some of them needing some clarification and whatnot. And Jeannie, do you want to talk about the next steps from November 8th to December 1st to post holiday, so they have an idea what the road looks like ahead?
Sure, yeah, no problem. So part of the discussion last night was around the fact that a lot of the recommendations are going to require follow-ups between the department and the commission members. And I expressed this last night and in previous meetings, and just want to express it again. We are absolutely willing to do that. I think it's going to be necessary to make sure that we can work together to implement the recommendations that ultimately come from the group. And we did talk about maybe giving everyone December off for a nice holiday gift, give everybody a break. I know people are tired and everyone has put a lot of time and effort into this, but we certainly don't want anyone walking away thinking that just because we submit a report to the legislature on December 1st means that everything is over and you know, we're not going to continue the work. We're definitely willing to do that. And again, I think it's going to be necessary actually to continue the process.
So folks don't need to jam in every creative idea under the sun between now and November 8th. If the agreement in principle's there, the framework's there, the need for more clarity and specificity can come after the holidays. So, but you need a report to meet this deadline, but it's not over. So people can still come with good ideas and just make it a better, more solid, more comprehensive agreement. Yeah.
Right, and I think we can absolutely and confidently say to the legislature that everyone has made a really good faith effort here. Again, you all have put in a lot of time and a lot of work in a volunteer position, but an important position to even get to where we are today. And I don't think that's going to be lost on anyone. So we really appreciate how seriously everyone has taken this charge. And I just have to believe that the legislature will recognize that as well.
Good. That's promising. From a process and substantive point of view, it's good. It's promising all around. So Quinn and Elizabeth, do you guys want to show what the latest ratings look like?
Yes, Elizabeth, can you share your screen? And everyone should have received the updated notes from last night and also the listening session that's posted on DNR's website. Similar to tomorrow, I will also send out the notes from tonight and also a link to the listening session on DNR's website. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these, read through them, I'm gonna go one by one and we're gonna discuss to see if anyone has any questions, comments, or clarifications. OAC Draft Recommendations. This document contains two types of draft recommendations: options that have been rated 75% or higher and the text is approved, options that have been rated 75% and the text has not been approved. So I'm going to go through the text that has been rated 75% and that has been approved. Shell resource recommendations. There's an important need for clean shell and substrate that will support enhancement of all sectors of the oyster resource, including the public fishery, aquaculture, and public and private restoration efforts. DNR should evaluate and develop cost-effective strategies for identifying and obtaining sources of shells and substrate. DNR should review the current state laws and regulations to evaluate and develop potential strategies, including providing economic incentives to retain shell in the state of Maryland and reuse it. DNR should support a Maryland-wide substrate action subcommittee of the OAC to evaluate strategies, costs, and benefits for substrate enhancement. Enforcement monitoring recommendations. Enforcement and monitoring play an important role in ensuring the protection of the oyster resource and the timely tracking of its status. The recommendations are: DNR should work to improve the fall dredge survey, examples given, new locations, fall dredge survey before start of the fishery, and cooperative survey with industry. DNR should develop tools to mark navigation hazards and oyster management boundaries. For the management action recommendations, the OAC recommends that the following actions be taken to rebuild oyster populations, enhance harvest revenue, increase habitat, and reduce nitrogen and phosphorus in Maryland Chesapeake Bay. Over the next 25 years, a combination of replenishment and restoration activities should be undertaken in Eastern Bay with an equal amount of funding for spat planning and sanctuaries, $1 million annually adjusted for inflation, and for spat and shell planning on fishery bars, also $1 million annually adjusted for inflation, in addition to current replenishment and restoration activities. The effectiveness of this option should be evaluated every 5 years. So these have obviously been rated 75% and the text has been approved. Moving on, these are the ones that we will definitely go through and discuss and ask if there's any clarification, comments, questions, and if you want to add any additions. As Brian stated, there will be no ratings tonight, just so that we can make sure we have everyone participating and everyone is aware of what's going on. So these options that have been rated 75% or higher and the text has not been approved. Business practices, investment allocation, and marketing recommendations. OAC members recommend the following: non-model option E1, improve organization and cooperation among groups and integrate projects across the 3 sectors, which are fishery, aquaculture, and restoration. Agreement is 85%, however, the text has not been approved. Are there any comments, questions, or discussion from any of the commissioners?
I see Allison's got her hand up.
Okay, Commissioner Colden.
Thank you. I'm just sort of wondering what folks think integrating projects across the 3 sectors means, or what that would look like.
Has anybody else thought about that?
Chris?
Yeah, so my understanding of this from the meetings, so one, in terms of the 3 groups, we've always tried to take this balanced approach: fishery, aquaculture, and restoration. So I think that's somewhat self-explanatory. Conduct these projects addressing those 3 priorities. Integrate, what I think I've heard the group talk about is get these groups to do some projects together. So Eastern Bay stands out in my mind as an example. Some fishery projects, restoration projects, aquaculture. So to me, integrate speaks to some, say, cross-fertilization, working together. And then those 3 sectors, those are our 3 priorities. That's what I think I recall from different meetings.
Johnny, did you want to say something?
Yes, with respect to nutrient credit trading, we see possibilities to work across all 3 of these sectors to do credit trading. The fishery, piece is one that we've got to refine a bit, but we feel that is totally doable, especially with the cooperative being in place to be able to work under the mandates of the expert panel, the requirements that they set forth back in 2018 requires put and take. We believe that the fishery can actually adapt and do a bit of adjustments and be able to qualify under those rules to be able to qualify for nutrient credit trading, along with aquaculture, and of course aquaculture, but also restoration.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley.
Hey, Elizabeth, were you able to capture the gist of, that was a lot. You're off mute, but we can't hear you. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I got it.
Okay. So the comments you're making and the ideas that you have go in the notes, and who knows, it could wind up in another meeting in terms of if you guys want to take an agreement in principle and look at it in a more specific way. So if you finish with asking the question, please.
Can I add just one other comment? This is Sean Corson. To my mind, this is part of this is about collaborative planning effort, and to sort of follow up on Johnny's point there, thinking about the collective benefits of working across these sectors, whether that's related to larval transport or nutrient crediting. But I would imagine that something like this would involve a plan like the kind of plans that the restoration work uses, where you have essentially a blueprint and you look at optimal locations and you think about the 3 different sectors and how you could site those areas, all 3 of those sectors in one area, to maximize the benefits that that each one of those different practices generates.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Discussion? Non-model option E2, improve processor capabilities and techniques. Examples given: more shucking houses, develop frozen products.
An agreement of 100%.
Commissioner Shockley, do you have a comment?
Your hand's up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to be up, but I can say, we're working on that exact, Blue Oyster's working on that exact language as we speak. We'll share that later. It has nothing to do. I approve of the comment. I didn't know I had my hand up. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Colden?
Thanks. I have no problem with this comment. I'm just wondering if this document is going to DNR, what do we expect DNR to do to develop frozen product? Can we add more specificity as to what would be under DNR's purview that would lead to these outcomes, or is that necessary for us to do?
Jeannie, you want to grab that?
I think Allison raises a good point. As I read it now, my assumption would be that this is something that we would want to partner with the Department of Commerce and Department of Agriculture on, for example, to try to facilitate incentives or pathways for businesses to get into these lines of products. But this is one of those examples of, it's a great recommendation. It's great. There's 100% agreement, but we may want to talk through it as a group a little bit more after December.
Commissioner Shockley and Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes, just to follow up on the Secretary's statements, that's exactly the way I see this recommendation. We have tremendous support across the state for this type of private sector development. And, you know, hats off to these folks. I've been involved in this world now for over 10 years. We have a tremendous support mechanism. I think that to answer Allison's question, we just need the buy-in from DNR to support incentivize the various resources that we have across the state to get engaged to help make this happen. From to setting up operations, and I'm not lobbying this on my own behalf. I'm just saying, as a being in this world, I understand the needs, but from setting up operations to actually marketing nationally, internationally, the products that will come from those efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoffman. You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thanks, Gwen. I know we all know that there's a lot of issues with the labor supply for some of these types of jobs. And I just would want to make sure that when it says capabilities, that sort of includes sort of the capacity and the ability for, you know, potentially visas, et cetera, to provide the adequate employees for these, you know, type of operations. At least that's my understanding of one of the concerns for this type of work. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Next, non-model option E3. Use bars in the north as investments against disease outbreaks in Lower Bay.
And for those of you on the phone, that had a 90% agreement.
Any questions or discussion or anything to add? Commissioner Judy?
Yeah, so I read the summary from last night's meeting. You know, North is a little bit unclear if you're reading this and you don't know the background of the whole OAC's discussions. So for the benefit of those who haven't maybe read the note from last night, you know, North is unclear. So as I remember the OAC discussions on this, it was north of the Bay Bridge, and those notes from last night captured that. So this is something that, you know, could be edited, cleared up so that a new reader would understand what this statement means. It's at 90%. So even though it's unclear, I think we all understood it was north of the Bay Bridge.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanaki.
Yeah, so are we kind of dividing it into two pieces then? I mean, Lower Bay being south of the Bay Bridge, I don't know that most folks would look at it like that, right? So does Lower Bay need more specificity as well? Or is it just the concern about the north?
Well, it is, as a biological point, you tend to have disease outbreaks in the Lower Bay. The Mid Bay may or may not have a disease problem. So I think the main thrust of this non-modeled option was focusing on the northern part of the bay above the bridge where disease is not so bad when we have a breakout. So I think the focus is on north of the bridge, make investments, because the Lower Bay can go sour. Now, I don't know that we need to define the Lower Bay.
Okay. I mean, if we're defining, just wondering if we're defining one portion of the bay geographically, north, south, whatever, maybe we define the other one as well. I understand the thrust of the option thing.
Yeah, I think Lower Bay is just in the bucket of anywhere disease has an outbreak.
Okay.
Well, and to Scott's point, in a lot of other contexts, Lower Bay means Virginia. So
that's a good point, Allison.
you might want to say Maryland portion of the bay.
There you go. So now we're at 95%, I'm sure.
Yeah, that would be good.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, just one point I do want to make, and I understand this is about trying to, save if there is a disease outbreak, but then there's also a concern if you go too far north, especially with the weather conditions that we have now, where you have heavy rains and possibly you get a great big influx of fresh water, and you might have, a problem if you go too far north. So I'm wondering if there should be like kind of a demarcation line where you don't go above or something, just because you're concerned about the possibility of losing that product or those seed because of, a heavy rainfall.
Commissioner Judy, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I just want to echo that because I remember that was a lively part of discussion when this came up. There's some places in the Northern Bay is just too far north. But I don't think the group agreed at that time on how to define the north with that in mind. So maybe this is something like Jeannie just mentioned. This would be fleshed out, obviously, if this stays in and this becomes part of the report and it stays at 90%. Those details would be handled. We're not going to put something on a bad bar that is just going to kill oysters. But that's an excellent point. You can go too far north. So I want to agree with Jeff there.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. Any other comments, clarification? Next, non-model option E5. Use nutrient credit opportunities to help finance restoration and replenishment work in Upper Bay. And this has 9% agreement. Commissioner Shockley?
Yes. I'm muted. Okay, I'm good. So, we don't want to do too much here because it is 90%, but I did watch the playback from last night and heard the concerns from the public fishery, and I'm aligned with their concerns. I believe that perhaps we should maybe include the entire bay, number one, not the Upper Bay, because the entire bay is going to be of importance to this program. That's number one. Number two, I believe we should include all three sectors: the fishery, the aquaculture, and restoration, because as I stated earlier, I think they all will be included. Having said that, I would have put a caveat on the fishery and understanding and make it clear that the fishery needs to understand that as they operate today, they don't necessarily come in line with the recommendations from the first expert panel report on the bioextraction requirements. And so, but I believe that that they can easily adapt to that by adopting some sustainable practices, or if you would, some sort of a program that would include put and take, which is absolutely going to be necessary in order to qualify under the credit trading program. So I guess what I'm saying is that I would consider making that the entire bay, not just the Upper Bay, and to include all three sectors into this language. And then, as the secretary suggested, then we can get into the weeds on details later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley. Commissioner Colden?
Well, I agree with some of what Johnny said. Some of the details I think are important at this point. As he said, right now, the way the fishery operates, they will not qualify. So none of the replenishment work would qualify currently. And one of the reasons why I think that there is some interest in changing the harvest reporting recommendations is there's going to be changes in harvest reporting requirements that would be required to qualify under this program. And also it has to meet additionality, so everything, it has to be above and beyond what would normally be done to qualify. And then I also don't understand who we are suggesting, or from a framework, who would be generating and benefiting from these credits. Are we saying that the department should receive these nutrient credits or replenishment work? I just feel like there's a lot of unknowns out here right now. I mean, I think we've got the denitrification BMP that is supposedly imminent. We've got the bioextraction for aquaculture. But as it stands, we're making a recommendation that cannot be implemented.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden. Commissioner Stockley, use your hand still up, or are you?
Yes, no, I want to follow up if I could on what
Yes,
Allison
Commissioner Stockley.
stated. It's totally legitimate concerns. What we see is the opportunity to engage, the private sector can engage with the public fishery to represent them and to being able to generate these credits and to bring enormous value back to the fishery in multiple ways. So yes, there is a lot to be talked about, and that's what I was stating. But we can't talk about it until we move forward, and certainly nothing can happen until it meets the recommendations from the expert panel. That's what that expert panel is all about. So I believe that we just need to include everyone into the opportunity to be able to participate in cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay by way of a fishery that was iconic to the state and to the Bay. And that we can't let this get by us, this opportunity to make everyone inclusive of the opportunity. Thank you.
Dr. North, could you scroll up a bit? Because I think the chat bar kind of covers the last option. Perfect, thank you. Any other comments or discussion? Yes, Commissioner Kanaki?
Yeah, sorry, I tried to raise my hand earlier. Just want to second what Commissioner Colden said, particularly about additionality and really ensuring, the goal here, from my perspective at least, maybe not from everybody's, is for nutrient credits to incentivize the provision of ecosystem services. And while Johnny's position and kind of, elucidation, if you will, of this kind of collegial and everybody at the table, I think that's great in spirit. We just have to make sure that we are incentivizing folks that to have more oysters in the water that are providing more ecosystem services. And if all the different sectors are doing that, can do that, then through nutrient credits, then fantastic. But if not, then, I think that's problematic.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanaki. Commissioner Judy?
Yeah, this is just an observation, not a response to any comments so far. They've all been thoughtful and thorough. So just as an observation, as written, and yes, this is a little bit unclear, but as written, it got 90% agreement. So we have something that pretty much all of us have bought into. It's a good concept. We've got a thumbs up all over it. So, if it needs some tweaking, if it needs some course correction or whatever, I would just encourage that any kind of adjustment doesn't work to erode the consensus. So we have a statement, maybe it raises some questions, but we went through it before and it's at 90%. I think that's a plus.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. Commissioner Colden?
Thanks. Chris's comments bring up a good point, and I know previously there had been a statement made that there would be no additional narrative included in the report beyond the recommendations. And I'm just sort of wondering, we've all said that we kind of agree with the sentiment, but there are significant questions or challenges to implementation. And I'm just wondering, from the framework of the report, is there going to be a means by which we can capture those things so that we don't wordsmith ourselves into disagreement like Chris was talking about, but we have a place to explain ourselves, because people who could still say they had minor reservations, and that means that they still technically agree with the sentiment, but there's no, if there's no narrative, that's not captured anywhere, what those questions or concerns are. So will there be any opportunity in the report to include any of that type of narrative?
Is that something that you as commissioners can recommend, like putting in, here's the stuff that here's the recommendations, but here's some of the items, I don't want to say concerns, but issues that we want to have worked out in further discussion or something like that. So it kind of allows an opening procedurally for more time to have those discussions and to get the specificity clear. But I'm wondering if that's on a procedural point, if that's okay, but I think maybe Jeannie or somebody might be able to help out on that.
I can say my understanding of the process is that there would be no additional narrative along with the recommendations, that the recommendations were meant to stand as they are. And I'm not quite sure how would we get agreement on additional the process for getting that additional agreement, like how that would happen between now and December 1.
I probably shouldn't have said this. I was thinking post December 1.
Oh, okay. That post December 1. Yeah, that's cool to like have people.
I mean, to flag it, to
really,
flag.
Sure, this would be great structure to have the groups. I mean, I think that's my understanding. Like, is that would be very helpful to have that happen after these recommendations are agreed on.
And Commissioner Dean, did you have a comment or?
No, Quinn, I was just going to say, I kind of feel like that's kind of what the introduction was from the secretary, saying that, you know, it's a given that our job isn't finished and each one of these things are going to need a little bit more tweaking.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Yes, Quinn, this is Johnny. It's Johnny again, and I'll make this my last statement. But I just wanted to make the statement about the Waterman community. I really feel we need to find a way to include everyone here, and to this opportunity. This is a revolutionary type approach to that we're in the middle of trying to get done, and we really need to make everyone inclusive. And I think that the language, the opportunities to help finance, restoration, and replenishment, it can be seen as the Waterman community by way of the replenishment. I still have a problem that we're pigeonholing ourselves with the Upper Bay statement there. And I think that would be that. I just want to make sure that we're not going to pigeonhole ourselves and limiting this program that only be done on the Upper Bay. That's a major concern for me. I can live with the other language. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley. And Commissioner Hoffman says in the chat, I would echo Johnny's comment about making this provision Bay-wide. Commissioner Judy?
Oh, yes. On the topic of the Upper Bay, I never took that statement to be that all of the OAC's recommendations and investments and seed planting would be in the Upper Bay. I think this is just one tool in the toolbox, one strategy to apply. I think there's other things to come. I read this document beforehand, shell planting, seed planting. So the Maryland Bay is the field upon which we will do these things. I don't think that statement about the Upper Bay limits everything to go there. I wouldn't support that. I don't think that was the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. Any other comments, questions? Next, education and training recommendations. There's an important need to educate and train citizens about stewardship of the oyster fishery and resources to maintain it for current and future generations. Non-model option F1. Special efforts should be placed on outreach and education in minority communities to enhance awareness of the oyster resource and associated career opportunities and environmental benefits. There was 85% agreement on this. Is there any comments or questions or discussion for this one? And then Commissioner Harris in the chat, I believe for the previous option stated Upper Bay is Maryland, Lower Bay is Virginia. Thank you. Next. Improve science recommendations. OAC members identified several knowledge gaps, which is filled with enhanced management of the oyster resource. Non-model option G1. Conduct a comprehensive survey of the Maryland Bay bottom with a focus on describing the current amount, quality, and location of oyster habitat. This has 90% agreement. Any clarification needed, comments, questions, or any additions? Thank you. Non-model option G2, develop the ability to make stock assessment forecasts of abundance and harvest. This is agreement 75%. Commissioner Harrison, do you have a comment or question? I thought you were gonna mute yourself, sorry about that. And Commissioner Colden, do you wanna reference the minority communities, that option?
Yeah, in the previous option, I was just saying there's been a movement away from using the term minority communities in general when discussing historically excluded communities or other terms. So if that's what we're trying to get to, maybe it's worthwhile to use something that's more generally accepted. That's just a, change in the, not a change in the substance, just a change in the word.
All right, thank you. Dr. Norris, do you see that in the chat, those notes for that one?
Yes, I've got it. Thanks.
Quinn, this is Sean Corson again. I just wanted to clarify. I thought I heard you say that in the chat, the upper bay was referred to as Maryland and the lower bay is Virginia. And I think that's true in many contexts, but could you clarify or ask the group to clarify in various model runs or in various scenarios when the upper bay is referenced, if we're talking about Maryland or if we're talking about above the Bay Bridge? It seems to me like there's some lack of clarity there.
I know Commissioner Colden discussed that earlier, and then Commissioner Judy mentioned something about that, and then Commissioner Harrison has placed that in the chat saying upper bay is Maryland, lower bay is Virginia. So Commissioner Colden, Judy, or Harrison, would y'all like to clarify or discuss those model options and runs?
Well, I might.
Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say this was in relation to E5, use nutrient credit opportunities to help finance restoration replenishment work in Upper Bay. And I think Johnny Shockley was suggesting changing that to Maryland's Chesapeake Bay. And I don't know if that would make it more specific. I thought that was and then I think Jeff was replying to that, that discussion. I'm not sure. Was that correct, Jeff?
No, actually, I just put that down there so we could move along a little quicker.
Oh.
Here we are. But
Okay.
what I would say, the Upper Bay, and it used to be from the Bay Bridge up, but now I almost would say it's from Poplar Island up, because that seems to be where we have the problems. We don't have much that goes on above there anymore as far as oysters go. So the Upper Bay, yeah, it's just, I would say at least from the Bay Bridge up, but maybe even from Poplar Island up.
Elizabeth, could you scroll down so we can see the one that we're discussing?
Sorry, it's like I have so many windows open.
Thank you.
Scroll
Appreciate
up, you mean this one?
Or yeah.
Yeah, this one.
E5.
Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Brown, do you have a comment? I see your hands raised. We'll come back. Commissioner Judy.
Okay, I'm glad we revisited this because Upper Bay also, of course, occurred above when it talked about the Northern Bay. So just as a stepping back, E3, that conversation with the OAC over numerous meetings, that was above the Bay Bridge because you want to escape disease, which could be lower. But Upper Bay and E5, yeah, I support people's comments about that's basically Maryland. We wouldn't want to restrict, I don't think, nutrient credit opportunities to just the Upper Bay. So I would support, as people are talking about, that should be Maryland's Bay, I think. So we have the most potential for using this strategy.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. And Commissioner Hoffman placed in the chat, I think our discussion of Upper Bay demonstrates a lack of common understanding of this term and a need to be more specific. Commissioner Brown, are you able to unmute yourself? I see your hand is raised.
Yes, the whole bay needs to be into this, the Maryland portion of it, because you never know, times change, weather changes, salinity changes, so we need to have have it open so we can do whatever we need to into the future. And I do want to talk about that another matter when we get back down to it on G2, I think it is, on the sustainable harvest study.
I believe that's coming up shortly.
Okay.
Commissioner Harrison, do you have another comment, question, clarification?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. So G2, develop the ability to make stock assessment forecast of abundance and harvest, and that's at 75% agreement. We were on that one. Commissioner Brown?
Yes, I have a little problem with this because the sustainable harvest study that they have is saying that we are over harvesting in the Tangier Sound and Harris Creek, and that is our ace in the hole in the oyster industry in these places over here in Lower Bay and those places, and they saying that they're being over harvested. And I've asked Mike to Wilburn to give us another answer on that and come back on this, and he really never answered the question. And I have concerns about us putting too much dependency on it with what came out of that study. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other comments, clarification, additions for this option? Commissioner Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Quinn. I just wanted to emphasize what Robert T just said. It's almost like the stock assessment counts the number of oysters coming off as going up, but it doesn't give any credit for the number of oysters that are staying there as well. I mean, there's just more oysters on these areas, and it's kind of baffling our mind for us to be using these areas and harvesting on these areas. And yet these are the areas that would immediately be shut down if we were to ever go to management based on this. So I'm really uncomfortable with it too.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. Any other comments or questions for this one? And my eyes may have deceived me. I think I may have skipped G1.
Yeah.
Commissioner Judy.
Oh yeah, well on G2, before you go back to G1, the word forecast bothers me in this one. So taking a little bit different tack from the other folks, I don't know how you would actually forecast, predict the future. So I think I probably rated this low, and I see it's only at 75%. So the word forecast is, to me, problematic. I'm not sure how you actually nail that down. Who knows what the salinity in the spat set will be in the near future.
Commissioner Colden.
Yeah, so the forecast model is what we've already developed. That's basically what our oyster futures model is a forecast model. You would just be making a shorter term forecast. It's done very frequently. It's done for a bunch of different species. So, you know, at this point it says develop the ability. It doesn't say we have to use it. It doesn't say that it has to be taken into account, but it's kind of already been developed too. So just throw that out there for consideration.
I just recall Mike's constant reminders that it's not predictive. So it's a concern of mine, I guess, is what I'm saying. More conversation would help on this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. Any other comments? Oh, Commissioner Hoffman?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Gwen. Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused because we've been using, a model. Models aren't, I think we all know they're not perfect, but there are best ability to use the best science we have to approximate what, if we take certain management actions, what will happen in the future. And they're very, I mean, that's sort of the nature of fisheries management. And we've been using a model to help drive the decision-making for this entire process and in developing the different scenarios and management recommendations. So I'm just a little confused as suddenly I guess I hear the folks saying that, well, we don't think we should be, using a model, or we don't believe the model or whatever. So I'm not saying necessarily this one shouldn't be reworded a little, but it certainly seems very odd to me. Thank you.
Commissioner Brown, Dean, and then Commissioner Kanaki. Commissioner Brown?
Yes, the sustainable study, harvest study, that has only just been in and just completed once. It doesn't have it's not the best science available. It hasn't been proven yet. It hasn't gone far enough yet. And Tangier Sound and Broad Creek are two proven facts, as far as I'm concerned, that it's not just the best science available at this time. It needs to be tweaked more. And I don't think it should be in this until it's got to be developed. It just hasn't had enough, been in there long enough to have enough research to get all the glitches out. Thank you.
Commissioner Dean?
I just want to kind of make the point. I think there hasn't been a meeting yet that we haven't questioned the results of the stock assessment and what that's showing. So I don't want anybody to think that this is an all of a sudden kind of thing. I think that we've been asking this along the way. I know I've sent emails to Mike. I know I've tried to have conversations with members of the science community, because we've always been concerned that what we're actually seeing out on the bar is not what's what's not the results of what we're seeing. So I don't want anybody to think that this is something new, or that, we're just now seeing concerns. I absolutely want to be able to manage this fishery based on science, but I want to feel good about the science too.
Thank you. Commissioner Kanaki, is that your proxy you're holding? Commissioner
Yes,
Kanaki,
we're a little fussy tonight. Actually, the real proxy, Brittany Wolf Bryan, is on the call. This is
I'm joking. Commissioner Kanaki.
not ready for prime time, this one. I just want to second what Mark said. Totally agree with that. I was a bit confused. I think the predictive, or excuse me, the concern around the forecasting was confusing to me, given that that's what so much of the emphasis has been on is Mike's attempts, while flawed, no doubt, as folks say, attempts based on our best available information to, forecast what will happen in the future. So I'm just a bit confused as to the concern about forecasting and that term. Yeah.
I have that written down. I just wanted to say that the forecast model we're using specifically for this process was developed to evaluate the difference between options. So that was to have a fair way of evaluating different options. And I think that's the strength of the model.
Thank you, Dr. North. Commissioner Shockley, and then Commissioner Harrison. Commissioner Shockley.
Yes, I would just like to say that I think it will be very non-prudent to throw out any possible tools, scientific tools, any technology that we have at our hand this day and time. I also understand where some of the other folks are coming from. We can't rest our entire fishery on those reports until we know our tools are sharp, but we cannot throw aside the programs and projects that we're working on because of fear that they're not going to be accurate at this point in time. They may not be. That will come under the guidance of the OAC and as it is now and in the future, to make sure that those reports are accurate. But to throw them out of the realm of things at this point would be a mistake, I think. Thank you.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I wanted to also say that, you know, the problem with it is, and I have been looking at the oyster management review, and Broad Creek actually has 5 out of the top 10 bars. And then it's also the best tributary. And yet the stock assessment says it's being over harvested. So that's why I have a problem with that. How can it be all those other things? And 5 out of 10 out of 232 best bars, it had 5 out of the top 10. And then it is also the best tributary, better than Harris Creek that had 2.49 billion oysters put in it. And yet it's saying it's being over harvested. That's our problem. We have to revisit that part. Whoever's saying in the stock assessment that when it gets to a certain point, it's not sustainable, that's the part that is wrong, and that's the part that needs to be corrected.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrison. Any other comments, questions, clarification? Thank you. Non-model option G1. Conduct a comprehensive survey of the Maryland Bay bottom with a focus on describing the current amount, quality, and location of oyster habitat. This is at agreement 90%. Any comments, questions, or additions?
I had a quick question. I don't know if there's anybody on the call who can answer this, but I was also wondering if this could include sub-bottom work, like coring or ground penetrating instruments. And if we thought that that would be captured without specifying that.
Commissioner Judy?
Yeah, well, I'm no expert on those types of equipments, but because the wording says conduct a comprehensive survey, and it doesn't limit it to simply looking for culch or oyster bars, or you know, there's no limitation in that phrase. So I think if this passes, it has 90%, that's good. You know, these discussions that can happen later could put together such a survey as Allison's talking about to do more than say was done in the last Bay Bottom survey, because we do have a lot of better technology now.
And often the work that they do to validate the side scan sonar maps and other types of acoustic mapping, they do go back and do the sub-bottom work to validate the surveys. But I'll just say that.
Yeah, I would just say that I do think the 2 words that you put in there, Allison, I mean, you can do the multi-beam or single beam surveys of different areas. There are some limited capabilities with ground penetrating sonar, but you really do need to get into coring and if you want to get a better handle on volume or extent, as opposed to just, you know, surface measurement.
Thank you, Commissioner Corson. Commissioner Judy, you have a comment, question, your hand's up.
Sorry, hands down now.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next one. Non-model option G4. Determine ways to reduce sedimentation. This is that agreement of 100%. Any additions, clarification?
Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, I just want to flag or clarify that this is another one that I'm not sure the department has the jurisdiction over. I mean, I think MDE is the appropriate agency to communicate that to. So I just wanted to flag that this is another one that may not be headed to the right audience.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden. Any other comments, questions, response?
I just make one observation. I said this last night, was that the, some of these recommendations, the academic scientists can use these type of recommendations to justify proposals to federal or foundation sources, so they could have a better chance of getting funding from somewhere out of the state to do this kind of research.
Thank you, Dr. North. Non-model option G7, conduct studies to estimate the loss rates of shale, both newly planted and existing bottom. Agreement is at 85% for this option, non-model option. Any comments, questions, or additions, clarification needed? Next, non-model option G8, conduct studies to estimate the loss rates of artificial substrate. Agreement 75%. Any additions or clarification? Dr. Kanaki?
Yeah, maybe this is my ignorance. I mean, what types of artificial substrate are we concerned that would have meaningful loss rates? Like, you know, granite or stone is not going to have like a meaningful loss rate. Like as far as like, you know, are the time dimension that we're concerned about, which is not like thousands or whatever, however many years, right? So maybe can we be more specific? Maybe I'm just not aware of something that folks are thinking about. They're concerned about like a loss rate that's meaningful.
Any comments?
I mean, I'll just agree with that. I think I made the same comment when I submitted the form, was that the loss rates of the materials that we're talking about, stone and even concrete, are far longer. So just thinking about the costs and benefits of trying to maintain a multi-decadal study to watch concrete erode, is maybe not a great use of resources.
Thank you.
And can I just, so could I have my hand up still?
Right,
If I could
Commissioner Kanaki, you
Yeah.
can respond.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it was just kind of a broader point that we're going to be throwing a lot here about like all sorts of things that we'd like to do. And I understand that this one's got a 75% agreement, but we hand people like grab bag of 30 or 40 things that we want to do, like maybe like at the margin, some of these things that we all agree on because it's not harmful, but would cost money and resources, maybe a lower priority. It's just not equivalent to other things that we want to do. And it's way down the list of priorities. I think most people would agree. So that's just kind of a broader concern about including something like this in the document.
Commissioner Shockley?
I'm just concurring. You know, I guess we'll have our say when we get to vote again on the final vote, but it's just something that should be of the interest of the folks who implement the project, rather that be public or private. I don't think it's DNR's, it should be in DNR's scope of all the other much more important things that they should be focused on, and not something that we should, as OAC, should be recommending. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley. Any other comments, clarification, questions? Non-model option G8. Conduct studies to estimate the loss rates of artificial substrate. Agreement 75%.
We just did that one.
We just did that one, I
know.
think. Sorry, I gotta
Oh
go
yeah,
up.
you didn't go
My
down.
fault, sorry.
Exactly. Shell source recommendations. Non-model option A4. DNR should conduct pilot projects to study the efficiency of different substrates. Examples given: small stones and mixed shell, and the effect of height and sedimentation rates. Its agreement at 82%. Any clarification, additions, or comments? Okay, next, non-model option A7A, version 2. DNR should work collaboratively with the OAC to commission an academic peer-reviewed study to evaluate the ability of bar cleaning to clean shell and harvest areas in preparation for spat sets. This agreement's at 82%. Any additions, clarification, or comments?
Dot, did you have your hand up for the last one?
Oh, Commissioner Colden?
I think she's pointing at me, Quinn. I raised my hand at the last one.
Okay.
I mean, just like the efficiency of setting, of larvae setting on different substrates. Is there just like a clarity issue for like the legislature and non-modeled option A4? Is that what we mean by study the efficiency? When we say efficiency? We're not just talking about height and sedimentation, right?
Is anyone from DNR or want to clarify?
Oh, I want to be careful here. I don't want to lead anyone, but I think we had a little bit of discussion about this last night as well, and whether it's studying the efficiency of it or the effectiveness of it. So I think it would be important to get clarification from the commission members on that. And it seems to me that that would be in addition to the effect of the height and the sedimentation rates.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, along the lines of what the Secretary was just saying, it feels to me that they should be split into two separate recommendations. I feel like that is a lot of things to cram into one recommendation, and it could cause more issues with the clarity and the acceptance level. And the effective height is going to be different than your effective substrate, and both of those are going to be affected by the context of the sedimentation rates in the area where you are. So I think those should be split into two separate recommendations. I think we need to be clear as to what the purpose of the pilot projects are. I think with respect to different substrates in restoration areas, we've done far more than a pilot program. We've done, I don't know, 900 acres worth of restoration using different substrates and different heights. And so I'm a little bit unclear as to where the pilot projects are going to. I think we've talked before about doing pilot projects using different substrates in open harvest areas, but that is not captured here. And so I'm wondering if we need to be clear about where those are occurring and what the purpose of the pilot programs are.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden.
I did not catch which needed to be split out. Height versus sedimentation rate. Was that your recommendation?
No, I would split out height and sedimentation from substrates.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions, or additions? So for non-model option A7A version 2, are there any comments or questions? I know we went back and forth to A4. I'll read this one more time. DNR should work collaboratively with the OAC to commission an academic peer-reviewed study to evaluate the ability of bar cleaning to clean shell and harvest areas in preparation for spat sets. Agreement 82%. Okay, thank you. Management action recommendations. Non-model option C5. DNR should consider annual changes in regulations in response to annual stock assessments. Agreement 78%. Are there any additions, comments, questions regarding this option C5? Commissioner Brown?
Yes, I realize that under the present oyster management plan that we have, we reevaluate everything every year to start with. But when it comes to the sustainable harvest study that we just had, and it turns around and it says that Harris Creek and the Tangier Sounds are not sustainable, I mean, that's where we run into a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other comments or questions regarding non-model option C5? Commissioner Judy?
Yeah, so this might be helpful to the group. This was a comment last night from Dr. Miller, and I may not paraphrase him accurately, but I'll try. So he had a concern, and of course, he's skilled with stock assessments and such. So he said an annual time frame could be a problem because if you look at things annually, you may just be looking at the noise. Things go up, things go down, the next year up, down, where what's important is the overall trend. So if you did a stock assessment, say every 3 years, 4 or 5, you can detect trends. If you look at it annually, you may just be listening to the noise of the up, down, up, down, up, down. And I might have not captured that correctly, but that's maybe something that the group can consider. He made a strong point about that last night.
Thank you, Commissioner Judy. Any other comments, questions, or clarification? Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, I'll just respond to that really quickly. I think that we could consider something on a longer time scale if the management plan for oysters included management triggers. But otherwise, there's nothing in the management plan which would require action on the part of the department in response to any of the information coming out of the stock assessment model, either positive or negative. So I think in this, that is what this is trying to get to, is, that information needs to be used in a management context so that we actually have changes happening in response to the assessment results, and don't just have the same regulations for decades on end.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden. Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I just worry that, we were in 2018, I think was the first stock assessment, and they made a law that said, I think we were in the OAC and we were getting ready to try to come up with some kind of plans to go into sanctuaries, and then that stock assessment law was made so that we couldn't do that. And since then, the past 3 years, it's shown that the industry's been getting better and it seems to have been working. So I thought that, everybody would go along with this, but I didn't understand that all of a sudden now we don't want to do the stock assessment, or we don't only want to do it every 3 or 4 years. I just don't understand why.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrison. Any other comments or additions, questions? Okay, next. Model option 25A. We're on that one. Okay, yeah. So model option 7A, version 2. The OAC supports keeping low harvest oyster bars in the public fishery. Agreements at 80%. Are there any comments or additions for this one, Commissioner Colden?
This is one of the ones that you all tried to flip, right? From not supporting low harvest bars being made into sanctuaries
Yes.
was the original option.
Yeah, and we that's been done before in a consensus process that Jeff Blair and Bob Jones have run.
Yeah, so I just don't, this is one of the ones where I think flipping it does not have the same connotation. Because one was an activity that you're doing and one is doing nothing. And so I just don't think that this is the same option when you flip the language around. And that's going to be a problem with several of the other ones too.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden, Commissioner Kanaki, and then Commissioner Dean.
Yeah, there's an interesting psychological factor at play here with like status quo bias and people's desire to kind of go with what exists, and then, well, it's okay because that's the status quo, versus changing something. And the psychological literature shows that there's a pretty serious status quo bias in a lot of cases. Just throwing that out there, kind of think that's along the lines of what Allison is perhaps, partially talking about, but yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanaki. Commissioner Dean?
Yeah, I kind of want to respond to that. I don't know if it's the whole idea of the status quo. I think that if you look at it like this, a bar that has low harvest is the same as a sanctuary that isn't being productive. So, I don't think that anybody wants to give up a sanctuary that's not being productive just because it's not being productive. Same thing on the public fishery, just because it's not being productive. And I don't know that anybody's going to come in and want to plant that bar, or if it was switched over to a sanctuary, because I don't see anybody wanting to put their resources into something that the guys aren't even taking anything off of, because it's an indication that the bar isn't necessarily productive for anyone. So I don't know if it's so much a tragedy of the status quo as it's just kind of a little bit more common sense that if nothing's coming off of it, well, did you really want it for a sanctuary? Because I think there's a lot of sanctuaries that we're not putting money in.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. Commissioner Shockley? Commissioner Shockley, please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry about that. I would follow up on Commissioner Dean's statement. I believe that neither side wants to give up grounds at this point in time that they've got. But I really truly believe that there are going to be opportunities coming to the public fishery that will enable them to go to these types of grounds and prove concept on their ability to bring back these areas. I believe there's going to be ways to resource this in the future, and I just don't think that it will be prudent at this time to continue taking away from the grounds from the public fishery. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley. Commissioner Kanaki, did you have your hand up?
You can let Allison go. I'll stand down for the time being, or whoever's next.
Commissioner Colden?
Thanks. So, I just want to sort of explain why I think this is different. And I think it comes down to the context of the conversation. And again, getting back to the fact that there's no narrative going along with any of these recommendations. the conversation that we had when this option was developed was, okay, we want more sanctuaries, and this was developed as the way to get more sanctuaries is we would put low harvest bars into sanctuaries. And so that was voted down because it wasn't effective. You know, what's the point in doing that if the sanctuaries, just turning them into sanctuaries doesn't make them productive automatically? So, you know, it was voted down because it didn't result in a positive thing. So not supporting that, to me, is different than saying proactively, we want to keep these places in the public fishery for an indefinite time period. So, you know, like in the context of doing one thing and making it a sanctuary, the lack of action is different than the proactive putting something into a public fishery in perpetuity. And then I think Mark brought up a good point in the chat that I don't know if people have seen yet too, is like, does this exclude areas that could go to aquaculture? Which is something we haven't discussed a lot about, but you know, by putting this recommendation forward, do we put a limit on aquaculture development in those areas? So I agree with Mark's comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Colin. In reference to Commissioner Hoffman's comment in the chat, would low harvest areas be potential candidates for aquaculture? Commissioner Kanaki?
Yeah, I'm just circling back to that one of the earlier options, option E.1, improve organization cooperation amongst groups and integrate projects across the 3 sectors. I would think that these like challenged areas where we're not having much success, that it's kind of at the margin, who gets it, who wants it, who could do what with it, might be an opportunity for some innovative, collaborative, integrated projects, and see what works. Just an observation that maybe that E.1 is in the spirit of like trying to figure out what works best in an area that's not performing well for different groups.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanaki. Commissioner Brown?
Yes. When you take and put these low bars with low oysters onto it, or not really productive oyster ground into a sanctuary, you have automatically eliminated that from becoming part of aquaculture, because these places are Yates bars, and if it's a Yates bar, it cannot be leased out. So it kills aquaculture even getting a chance to get any of it. These places, hopefully we can come in the public fishery and take in, do maybe some bagless dredging on it, get some shells up, or do something to work some of it. But if you put it in a sanctuary, you can't do nothing with it. You just put the nail right in the coffin on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other comments, questions, or additions?
So I'm just want to clarify here to Commissioner Colden about the, you were saying the OAC simulation model shows that just turning low harvest bars to sanctuaries would not be effective. And that's what came out of that option for you. That was the conclusion. Did I capture that right?
I don't know what you're asking.
I'm just trying to make sure I got the notes right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, so with respect to this option and its inclusion, I think the more important point or note that I was trying to make is that that the support was for not doing something, and this is a statement for doing something, which is the opposite. So I don't think it is the same type of statement that was previously supported.
Thank you, Commissioner Cole. And Dr. North, did you have all the notes?
Yes.
Thank you. Next. Model option 25A, version 1. The OAC does not support closing all bottom to oyster harvesting. Agreement 87%. Are there any comments, questions, clarification, or additions regarding this one? And then model option 25A, version 2, the OAC supports keeping the oyster fishery open. Agreement 87%. Any comments, questions, clarification, or additions for this one? Commissioner Colden?
So which one of these goes into the report?
That's up to you.
Yeah, you don't need to
They're
decide.
tied. One, the other, both.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I remember we discussed this. Wasn't it supposed to say public oyster fishery or? I can't remember. I just, because the way it reads is the oyster fishery open. I guess it means the public oyster fishery.
Or was it the wild oyster fishery? Was it the wild?
Yeah,
It's something
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, in October.
I agree.
It said
I
wild.
agree with Jeff. Yeah, I agree with Jeff. The conversation was the public oyster fishery or the wild fishery.
Yeah, what is a wild oyster fishery these days?
Yeah, well, I prefer public because wild implies it's just a bunch of wild oysters, but a lot of plantings are made. So I'm old fashioned. Public fishery is what it was for many, many years, decades upon decades. But wild has come into vogue in the last, say, 10 years. Just an editorial comment.
So yes, it's public, so the public oyster fishery. Any other comments, questions, or additions, clarification?
Allison.
Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, so I'm still struggling with the same conversation we had at our last meeting, which is taking an option that had 100% agreement and now moving forward with something that does not have 100% agreement. You know, if I was an industry member sitting in your shoes, I think 100% agreement is a stronger statement than 87% agreement. And so, you know, this is, like I mentioned earlier, another situation in which flipping from the negative to the positive, I don't think has the same connotation. And I'll reiterate my comment from the last meeting that the legislation requires the 75% agreement, not 75% support. So I don't think either one of these versions is necessary, and I think we should revert back to the original option and the original rankings.
But I think the original ranking was was 0%. So this idea, either positive, negative, the negative idea can't go in. It needs to it's had its rating here. So previously it was rated at 0%. So that the procedure is to see if the inverse would get rated and be acceptable.
Well, and Elizabeth, I have to agree to disagree there, because that's why I reference back to the legislative language, which says 100% agreement, not 100% support. So.
Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
We can come back to you. I'm going to Commissioner Dean and then come back to you. Commissioner Dean?
Allison, I'm having a hard time following you here because the agreement is at 87%. The language of the option has the word support in it, but it's not referring to the voting percentage. So will you clarify where you're going with that?
Was it, was that directed towards,
Commissioner Colden?
Is that for me?
So for me, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know.
uh,
Sorry, I can repeat it. I think Commissioner Colden, you said that your concern was that about support, but this does have 87% agreement. The word support is not being used to refer to the percent agreement. So I wasn't picking up what you were putting down. What do you mean? Because there is an 87% agreement here.
Yes, my point is that our original modeled option 25 had 100% agreement, and that now we're only at 87% because of the rewording, and that wouldn't it be a stronger statement to go with the original ranking and original wording?
This is where I'm
And
confused also.
Elizabeth's response was that because it was 0% support, that it could not be considered 100% agreement. And my argument is that the legislative language refers to percent agreement. So if 0 of us support it, then we all agree that it's bad. So I don't understand why we can't go with that original language. That's what I'm saying.
I guess the original language got a 0%. No one supported it. So so we can't go with that because that original language got 0%. And so in order to try to see if there was 100%, see if that rating could be flipped and have it be rated positively 100%. That's why we reworded it. And that's where these come from. Is that,
Yes. What I thought was, because we discussed it at the last meeting that, we wouldn't flip it, that this was a whole new option that we would rate. And so now it has rated 87%, which means it has met that threshold. So it has nothing to do about the flipping of it. This is a whole new option. Both of these are, my understanding.
yes, that's a better way of looking at it. That's a much better way of looking at it. That the original option 25A got 0%. And so a new option, version 1, was revised. That option text was revised to see if it would get a support. So technically, like 25A.1.
Any other comments, questions, discussion for these two?
I encourage this group to look at the discussion notes from last night. They had a lot to say about this option as well and had some good ideas about it.
all right, so how are we doing?
I think these are the last ones, correct, Dr. North?
Yes, and then this is the part of, with the remainder of the time last night, the folks went into an open discussion and commissioners talked about ideas that they wanted to bring up and discuss with each other.
And I think the benefit of having that got clarification from the secretary, from Jeannie, as to some of the future interaction of the OAC with the DNR post December 1, which I think gave people some hope that they can continue to have these discussions and have their voices heard.
And I'm happy to read anything anyone wants me to read back to them.
Elizabeth, does this make you feel like you're in class and you ask a question and no one wants to give you eye contact?
Well, actually, I'm a lot of training and just sitting and waiting until someone talks. So I can be here all night.
Yeah. And you can almost hear the heartbeat.
Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's kind of disappointing that we're at the end of this process and we only have one modeled option that received a consensus level recommendation. I think a lot of these other non-modeled options that we're discussing are kind of broad and hard to implement and may have various interpretations. And so I would just be interested in hearing from any of the industry members on the phone who are able to weigh in as to, you know, why do you think that none of the options that were put forward that increased harvest and increased the resource received any support?
Commissioner Dean, you had your hand up earlier. I don't know if you still wanted to say anything.
First, and then I'd follow up. My first question was really more of a process question. I kind of want to know what happens on November 5th. Are we going to be presented with a package and a simple yes or no answer? And then I guess I'd have a follow up after that.
Quinn, do you want to take that or should?
Yeah, from my understanding, all the options are 75% or greater agreement are placed in the package. And then each person, each commissioner will have a vote to accept the entire package, yes or no.
And I think but the first thing that's going to happen at the November 5th meeting is that this text that you guys have gone through tonight and discussed, each one of those are going to come up and ask for, you all need to approve or not approve that text. And what we're going to try to do is have the ones that seem more contentious or have a lot of discussion move down to the bottom so that we can get through as many of these options as possible in the given amount of time we have on the agenda. Then there'll be a time on the agenda to bring up some new options and maybe rate it. So it has to be, you know, we don't have a lot of time for that, but we still need to let people have that opening to bring up a new idea. And then at the end of the meeting, the vote on the entire package is going to happen. I think, is that right, Brian?
Yeah, and that's what the team's talking about. And I'm wondering, and I don't want to put Jeannie on the spot, but I've been doing that a lot lately. Sorry. But people mentioned last night some combination model options, and it's sort of like the creative process there. And it seems like we've just run out of time. And is there any possibility to take those ideas and looking at what Commissioner Colton's saying too, in terms of support for something, and throw it over the fence to January? And I'm not exactly sure what Jeannie said, but and I don't want to go any further than that, but process-wise, are we able to have discussions on ideas that may not have been in the final report?
Yeah, again, we the department would definitely be open to that. And I agree that there is probably a lot more conversation that can happen about particularly some of the combined options. I think, you know, part of what we discussed last night is that development of the model took a little longer than anticipated. The amount of time it takes to run each option was a little longer than anticipated. And as if talking about oyster policy wasn't hard enough, we had a global pandemic thrown on top of it. So we've been through some challenges and we've made really good progress to this point. But I definitely get the sense from commission members that there's some unfinished business that everyone is willing to continue working on. So, you know, while we are required statutorily to submit a final report on December 1, there's nothing in the legislation that I'm aware of or in the statute that I'm aware of that would cause us to just dissolve the OAC on December 1st and not continue the work. So that would be our intention.
Commissioner Dean, and also the meeting in November is Monday, November 8th. That's the day of the meeting.
Right, right. You said the 5th and I freaked. 8.
Commissioner Dean, do you have a comment, question?
I didn't want to ignore Commissioner Colden's question. I think she posed it to the industry, and I think it's a good question. I think it's a question that we have on both sides. You asked, you know, what were some of the barriers that we had to maybe taking this process a little bit further. You know, I remember early on in this process, you know, coming with Simon to the meetings and leaving out of the meetings and him feeling great about the discussions that he had in all those small groups. You know, he was like, hey, you know, Dave was listening to me. Allison heard me. Dr. Miller heard me. And, you know, while the process was painfully slow, and I think on both sides, we were really frustrated with the fact that we talked about maybe procedure a little too much. When COVID hit and it pulled the rug out from underneath our industry, it really, I mean, it just put a handicap. I felt for the frustration, you know, to receive the reports on a Friday night with 70 some pages. And, you know, I certainly hear the secretaries, you know, I kind of, I'll just reiterate that, yeah, the modeling took a while. Of course it's going to, but then to get those pages, you know, on a Friday before the Monday. And, you know, so I think that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And, you know, as far as the modeling options go, no, you know, I threw out 63, Allison, you know that. Would I like to see further discussion? Yeah. Did I see some of the feedback that you gave on it? Yeah. Do I think it's anywhere near possibly going into a December 1st, you know, report? Hell no. I don't even want it in there at this point because it's not molded into what it should be across both sides. So, I mean, I guess maybe that answers your question. Maybe it doesn't, but it's really just an honest feel on, you know, how we got this far and maybe why we didn't get far enough.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. Commissioner Harrison?
Yeah, and I agree too with Rachel. And, you know, plus it would have been really nice to have all of this information that we just received in this oyster management review, because it would really help on a lot of the questions that we've had concerning some of the substrates and things like that. So I definitely believe that we do have to go on. I knew this was not going to be the end of it. I've really kind of been involved in it for 5 or 6 years now. And I actually look forward to trying to get maybe some more done. Right now, the oyster wall survey is going on, and I think they're seeing another good spat set. So really, we're in a good position where I think that we can increase, you know, oysters. I'm not going to say back to, you know, historic levels, but I think that we can get back to maybe 20% of that anyway. And as far as concerning some of the models, I mean, some of them we just knew that we were not going to be able to do because of the lack of substrate or lack of shell. So those are things that we still have to work on. And like I say, you know, I'll be able to participate, I'm sure. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrison. Commissioner Brown?
Yes, you know, it's been very painful this past year going through this, you know, as slow as the meetings we're going to start with. And I agree with Rachel and Jeff also, and willing to work ahead to try to get where we need to be at. Mother Nature is making a good effort this past year with the results that we're hearing on the spat set that we've got. The oyster industry is moving slow, but it's moving in the correct direction. You got to realize that back in like 2004 and 5, we went down to 26,000 bushel that we harvested that whole season. And we lost all our brood stock pretty much. And we are in a building process now, getting everything back more towards a normal level of sustainable harvest all over the bay, which we pretty much have. But where we're at now is not where we need to be at. And I'm willing to work ahead to do what we can to try to get to a better place in the seafood industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other comments, questions, Commissioner Colden?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. First of all, I want to say I appreciate everybody who weighed in. I obviously recognize and sympathize and sat through it with you, the lengthy meetings, getting the model up and running, developing the procedure, all of that. I just worry. I mean, I've sat on, many of you have sat on the commission for longer than I have, but I've been on the commission for 5 years now. And we've been fighting about the same stuff for the past 5 years, before the consensus process, maybe after the consensus process. And so I'm just wondering, when does the switch flip and we can come to meet in the middle? Because my concern is we have a different basis of fact, like we're starting from a different place. You know, my evaluation of the modeled option results was anything that, you know, is better than the status quo with respect to harvest and, well, with first and foremost with respect to oyster abundance, because that's what I'm here to represent, and that's my job on this commission. But with respect to harvest and abundance, I saw those as win-wins. And it seemed to me that just because the idea came from a non-industry member of the commission, that it was immediately shot down. And so from my perspective, no matter how long we continue talking, if that's the approach, then we're never going to come to the middle, regardless of how much longer this process goes forward. So I was just really curious about some of those options that I was super excited about, because to me, more harvest, more abundance, and better off than we are now checked all the boxes for me. And those were options that did not receive consensus support.
Thank you, Commissioner Colden. Commissioner Shockley? Commissioner Shockley, please unmute yourself.
All right. We're just saying that with respect to oyster credit trading, nutrient credit trading, we are right at the beginning of a concept that's been adapted and is basically mainstream around the country at this point. And the entire industry around the country is super excited about that concept. We've got the ability and we've got the foundation laid on the Chesapeake, Maryland, and Virginia at this point in time. The policies are coming together, and it's been widely accepted. So I just feel that we can't stop now as working together as a group to use that tool to develop many things in the future for both sides. And I really do believe that it could be the catalyst that brings both sides together. So I'm totally in support of moving forward with the OAC, and believe that that our future is just beginning with respect to the oyster industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shockley. Commissioner Dean?
Thank you for giving me one more shot at it here. I heard Commissioner Colden kind of, questioning about how we got here and everything. And I don't think it's anybody's surprise that if I throw this out on the table, there is not a waterman or an industry member that has attended one of these meetings that did not feel like he was fighting to keep his livelihood. And, I was going to make that point, but then I heard Commissioner Colden say that she supported and was really excited about the options that increased harvest. So I'd be interested in looking back at the models that increased harvest that she supported, because all along, like I said, I feel like there hasn't been an industry member who's attended these meetings that didn't feel like they were here just to protect what they have, not even to fight for more, but literally just to protect what they have. And it's no secret that means income for the family. That means food on the table. So, I think that is the driving force, and I don't think we're hiding that from the industry side.
Thank you, Commissioner Dean. Any other comments? Questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Kanaki?
Yeah, I'll just throw my 2 cents in. It just seemed that different groups never really came to a good kind of like understanding jointly together of like what the facts are and the usability of the model and whether it was usable or was producing valid information. And it's not shocking to me that almost no model results findings, despite the enormous effort that Mike and Elizabeth and others put forth. Just seems like the viability of that was always on the precipice, and right or wrong, I'm not making any judgments on that or whether it should be or not. It's just it's hard to move forward with something when folks just didn't feel like the big majority had kind of bought into this as being like an effective tool for making decisions. Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Kanaki. Any other comments, questions? Commissioner Dean, do you have a comment or is your hand still raised?
My hand's down.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You get somebody wants attention.
That is another proxy.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. Otherwise, I'd had the same thing be happening. Well, if there's no other if there's no other thoughts or comments, we should take it forward. Go ahead.
Question. And that is if then this is for Secretary Riccio. If the commissioners would like to continue, do they is that a recommendation they need to make or not? It just will. I think that's what I'm hearing. They don't need to make a recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, you all have my commitment that we're gonna continue, but if the commission members feel strongly enough about it to turn it into a recommendation, I think that would be perfectly fine as well.
Well, if that happens, and the jump the fence into the next year, and this commission continues on with the work, and I wish I had joined the party earlier to have the experience. It's very awkward for you and for me, but some of the things we're hearing about, some common ground stuff and the models and the process kind of not being ideally put forth, and the heartfelt motivations and whatnot. I think that kind of gets to where common ground is, and it's not model based. It's like human value based. And so when I'm hearing these things, it's kind of like I can see where people are listening to each other in reinforcing what they're hearing, acknowledging what they're hearing, and I think that's where the right mindset comes into play. We're not into the psychology that Scott's talking about, like attribution bias or just automatically the status quo is, you know what? I think that's what the conversation we're having tonight is, the kind of dialogue where I've seen people who seem to have seemingly completely different points of view really realize there's much more common ground. I'll help you get what you need if you help me get what I need, kind of thing. And so Allison's saying, you know, there's kind of a surprise thing. I'm not surprised about the attribution aspect of it. And oftentimes some people and other groups I've worked with is they don't put their name on something, put it in writing, and it goes in there so that you kind of get past that, because there's a whole bunch of historical garbage with attribution. And it's just too bad good ideas are sometimes not listened to, or people feel as though they can't agree because they're on the defensive. A lot of good points have been brought up here, which I hope some of it, and it's not substantive based, but I hope it's captured so that the mindset can actually reinforce some good problem solving later on.
Commissioner Holden?
Yeah, I just had a question with respect to if this process continues, what sort of support would we have into the future? Would we have Mike's modeling capacity? Would we still have our facilitators? Sort of curious what the department is committing to relative to resources in this process.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I didn't really ask UMCs or facilitators, but I think, just based on the conversations that we've had, yeah, the intention would be to continue with the same process and the same group that we have in place now, or at least the same organizations that have been identified in the legislation as members. I think it's important to keep that the same, just for consistency, and especially because the members that are participating now have so much background and experience and knowledge about what we've done so far. So yeah, I mean, we can definitely talk through that further, and I'd be interested in getting the feedback from the commission members, but I think we continue with what we have in place now.
So, any other ideas or comments? Jody, if we're done, I'll render this. It's going to take a few hours. I'll throw it over the fence to you and your people tomorrow morning.
The recording to get posted on DNR's website, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
that works. Yep.
Okay. And Elizabeth, I can catch up with you in the morning on the written stuff, or if you've got time.
I probably won't have time, but I do want to let the commissioners know that although I've been typing furiously, the notes are going to be pretty simple, and trying to just capture what commissioners suggested related to the text of the option to try to help the other commissioners who weren't here tonight understand what was discussed. And because there's also the recording available on the web for people who want to go back and listen to the detailed conversation. But you all will see this hopefully by Thursday or Friday, so you all can comment on it, make sure I didn't miss anything that you think is important. And can I just say personally, I'm very grateful for your guys for this, the conversations you've had over these last 2 years. I think you all are making a great difference for Maryland.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for all your hard work, and your Mike's as well. Really amazing.
Okay, we good?
Yes.
Time to put some kids to bed and whatnot.